Chapter 19 revealing true colors. The carriage rattled along the uneven road leading to the Eastern Territory, the creak of wheels blending with the rhythmic clatter of horse hooves. Marcus held the reins tightly, his brow furrowed in concentration, or perhaps scrutiny. From the corner of his eye, he kept glancing at Phelan, his gaze lingering like an unspoken question. Phelan, seated comfortably beside Ron inside the carriage, finally snapped, her tone sharp and unapologetic. "You've been staring at me like you want to say something. Go on, speak, ask. It's not like you're going to stop with that look until you get some answers." Her piercing tone cut through the background noise, leaving an air of tension hanging. Marcus hesitated, but Phelan's annoyed expression told him she wasn't going to relent. She was different now, a stark contrast to the composed, enigmatic figure he and Ron first encountered. Her hair, once meticulously tied back, now flowed freely, framing her face with a hint of wildness. Her attire, though still formal, exposed her midriff, a daring departure from the robe-like garments she used to wear. The fabric seemed to evoke strength and defiance, a mage transformed into a warrior. "You seem different from the first time we saw you," Marcus finally said, his voice even but curious. Phelan smirked, crossing her arms with an air of confidence. "Ah, is that it? Well, just get used to it. The truth is, Marcus, Phi isn't different. It's just that you're now seeing who I really am. The rest? That formal facade? It's useful when I need it, but this is me. And don't worry, loyalty's not a problem. Ron's my master now, and I'll follow his orders. That doesn't mean I have to be delicate about it." Ron, who had remained silent thus far, observed the exchange carefully. There was no surprise on his face, only quiet acceptance. He seemed to recognize something deeper in Phelan, a raw loyalty shaped not by etiquette or appearances, but by genuine resolve. The road stretched ahead, winding into unknown territory, as the trio's dynamics continued to shift. Marcus, still processing Phelan's unapologetic shift in demeanor, kept his thoughts to himself for now. Whatever lay ahead in the Eastern Territory, one thing was certain. Phelan's true self had been revealed, and her loyalty, though unconventional, was unwavering. The horse's hooves echoed steadily against the packed dirt, and Marcus held the reins with steady concentration, his focus split between the road ahead and the woman seated beside him. Phelan's sharp jawline caught the early morning sun, her cropped hair swaying slightly in the breeze. She seemed at ease, though her piercing gaze and occasional smirk betrayed a restlessness. Her ears twitched. Amid the usual clatter of wheels and creaks of wood, a peculiar rhythm emerged, a murmur. She leaned her head slightly to one side, her sharp hearing catching scraps of Ron's voice floating out from inside the carriage. At first, it sounded like fragmented musings, but soon she began picking out the words, each one more bizarre than the last. "This isn't right," drifted out, followed by a louder, almost triumphant, "The people in the South." "Of course." Then, confusion. "Rock can't be boiled and eaten for its broth." A short pause. "Man? Monkeys? No. Man is not made from monkeys." Phelan raised an eyebrow, a mix of intrigue and amusement flashing across her face. She glanced at Marcus, who remained oblivious, his focus trained on steering the horses. Unable to contain her curiosity, she swung herself up with a grace that was almost unnatural. Before Marcus could react, Phelan had vaulted from her seat, her lithe figure now perched on the roof of the carriage. She crouched there, balanced like a cat on a narrow ledge, her cropped hair swaying in the wind as she tilted her head to listen more closely. The fragments of Ron's ramblings became clearer. The gravitational constant, 9.8 meters per second squared, always the same. Came one enthusiastic exclamation, followed by, "Butterflies. Chaos in the west, storms in the east." Then, with the fervor of someone unearthing divine truths, "Stars, burning gas. Not holes. Not divine." A laugh threatened to escape her lips, but Phelan bit it back. With a smooth motion, she hopped back down to her seat beside Marcus, landing lightly as though she'd only shifted her weight. Marcus barely had time to glance at her before she turned to him with a curious, almost childlike look. "Is he always like that?" she asked, her tone laced with intrigue. Marcus glanced sideways, suppressing a smile. "You get used to it," he replied, his voice even, but the amusement was clear in his expression. "Ron's a thinker. Let's call it that." Phelan shook her head, her smirk fading into a more serious expression. She crossed her arms and leaned back, her cropped hair catching the breeze. She muttered, almost to herself, "Did I do the right thing joining you people? Is this guy a madman?" She paused, exhaling sharply through her nose before adding with a wry smile, "Oh well. I guess fate ran its course." Marcus, sensing her uncertainty, kept his focus on the road but spoke firmly. "Ron's not like anyone else, Phelan. That much is true, but rest assured, he's one of the most dependable people you'll ever meet. He might act eccentric, even stupid at times, but he's got a good heart. He cares for people, and you." Marcus shot her a quick glance, his voice softening. "He's someone you can trust when it matters most. Don't let his quirks fool you." Phelan let the words hang in the air, her golden eyes narrowing slightly as she processed them. Finally, with a sigh, she shook her head. Sure, she muttered, her tone both resigned and faintly amused. Yet, there was a flicker of relief in her expression, like a weight had been lifted, just slightly. Though she wouldn't admit it, Marcus's words had eased some of her doubts. The carriage trundled on, its passengers as mismatched as the patchwork of hills and plains surrounding them. Phelan allowed herself a small, reluctant smile. The road ahead was as unpredictable as Ron's thoughts, but perhaps, just perhaps, she had made the right choice after all. The arrows came fast, tearing through the air like whispers of death. Marcus's grip on the reins tightened as he brought the carriage to a sudden halt. "Ambush!" he shouted, his voice calm yet commanding, as figures emerged from the trees, their masked faces gleaming with menace. Phelan was already moving, her agility unmatched as she jumped down from the carriage. Her hand went to her staff, a polished piece of wood inlaid with elemental runes. Sparks flickered at her fingertips as she extended her arm. "Back off," she growled, her tone sharp, yet there was an edge of uncertainty in her voice. One of the masked attackers lunged at her. Phelan gritted her teeth and thrust her staff forward, summoning a bolt of flame. The fire roared to life but faltered slightly as it struck the ground near the bandit instead of hitting its mark directly. She cursed under her breath and tried again, this time summoning a gust of wind that blew the bandit off balance. The attacker stumbled, giving her just enough time to rush forward and finish them off with a quick jab of her staff. It wasn't perfect, but it was effective. Marcus, watching from the front line, felt a flicker of admiration even as his sword flashed in clean, precise arcs. "Not bad for a divinant," he muttered to himself, deflecting a strike with practiced ease. His movements were deliberate, his strikes controlled, every bit the seasoned fighter. "Needs polish," he added quietly, his tone critical but observant, but strong enough for a newbie. "Hey!" Phelan called out, dodging another attacker with a lithe movement. "Little help here, warrior genius." Marcus smirked, his calm demeanor never wavering. "On your left," he replied evenly, dispatching another bandit before stepping in to shield her. "Don't rush your spells. Let them flow." Phelan grumbled but nodded. Her next attack was smoother, a crackling stream of ice that coiled around her opponent's legs and held them in place. "Flow. Got it. Anything else, Sensei?" "Stop talking," Marcus deadpanned, as his sword cut through another foe with practiced efficiency. From inside the carriage, Ron's voice rang out, casual and unaffected. "What's happening?" "Oh, arrows. Fascinating projectile weapon. Do they understand aerodynamics? Probably not." "Ron!" Marcus barked. "Stay down. Stay down?" Ron muttered, almost offended. "I'm formulating a strategy. I'll formulate their faces into the dirt." Phelan snapped, dodging an incoming strike and countering with a swift slash of her staff. "Can you formulate faster?" Marcus positioned himself between the carriage and the bandits, parrying an attack with practiced precision. "He's always like this," he said calmly, cutting down his opponent. "Focus, Phelan." Ron's voice continued, completely unbothered. "You know, their trajectory is all wrong. If they understood quantum mechanics, they'd compensate for Ron." Marcus and Phelan shouted in unison. The carriage door creaked open. Ron stepped out, his stride deliberate, casual, as though he wasn't walking into the middle of an ambush. Phelan paused, mid-spell, her golden eyes narrowing. "What are you doing out here?" "Balancing the scales," Ron replied, stretching his arms. "Seems fair." Before she could protest further, one of the attackers lunged at Ron with a blade. Without hesitation, Ron caught the blade mid-swing with his bare hand, snapped it like a twig, and hurled the attacker into two others. The impact shook the ground, sending a ripple of dust and shockwaves outward. Phelan froze. Her staff slackened in her grip as Ron moved through the chaos like an unstoppable force of nature. His strikes were devastatingly efficient, his movements precise yet terrifyingly casual. Bandits crumpled like paper under his sheer power. What? Phelan stammered, wide-eyed as Ron threw another bandit aside like they weighed nothing. What is he? Marcus, parrying another attacker's blow with effortless calm, spared her a glance. You haven't seen the best of him yet, he said quietly, almost as if it were an inside joke. Phelan blinked, her voice almost trembling. He's stronger than this? Marcus nodded, dispatching another foe with a clean, measured strike. This is him holding back. Training or battle, doesn't matter. When it counts, he's unstoppable. And yeah, he's stupidly strong. Ron finished the last bandit with a crushing blow that sent the attacker skidding across the dirt, then adjusted his robe as if nothing had happened. Anything else? He asked, his tone as casual as someone discussing the weather. Or are we done here? The bandits fled, leaving the trio standing amidst the chaos. Phelan leaned on her staff, her breath heavy, her mind whirling. You're insane, she muttered, staring at Ron. Insane and stupidly strong. Ron shrugged, brushing some dust off his sleeve. Insanity's relative. Marcus chuckled, sheathing his sword. Trust in him, Phelan. He's brilliant in ways you can't imagine. He looked at her, calm and assured. Listen when he gives advice. You'll learn. Phelan sighed, crossing her arms. At least life won't be boring, she muttered, though the faint awe in her voice betrayed her bravado. Marcus smiled faintly. That's one thing you can count on. The village was in turmoil. Farmers shouted over one another, their voices rising above the cries of children clinging to their mothers. The elder, a frail but determined man, paced at the edge of the square, his face etched with worry. When the trio dismounted their carriage, the elder rushed toward them, his hands trembling with urgency. Our sacred moon goat has been stolen, he cried, his voice breaking with desperation. Without her, the crops will fail, and the goddess will curse us all. Phelan folded her arms and let out an exaggerated yawn, her cropped hair swaying as she shifted her weight. What is it with you people and goats? Relax, it's just a goat. Marcus cast her a calm sidelong glance but said nothing. He turned his attention to the elder, his steady gaze revealing none of the disbelief Phelan so openly displayed. Ron, however, dropped to a crouch beside a patch of trampled dirt, his movements precise as he brushed away debris. His sharp eyes narrowed, and a faint grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. He murmured, tilting his head. These claw marks? Too evenly spaced, they were made with tools. And this? He held up a metal hook, turning it over in his gloved hand. Crimson Maw bandits. Predictable. Marcus straightened and scanned the area. His voice was low but steady as he added, their hideouts along our route. Phelan groaned loudly, letting her staff fall to the ground as if the entire ordeal were a personal affront. We're not goat retrieval services. Can't these villagers solve their own problems? Ron stood, adjusting his coat with a purposeful flick. His expression shifted, the faint grin broadening into something theatrical, almost heroic. No, Phelan, he said with quiet conviction. But they stole from people who can't defend themselves. That makes it our business. Phelan raised an unimpressed eyebrow. Oh, our business? You're serious, aren't you? Marcus gave her a subtle nod, his tone unwavering. He's serious. And he's right. Ron's plan unfolded with meticulous precision. It was bold, eccentric, and grounded entirely in science, no magic required. The disguises, he insisted, were essential. They would confuse the bandits and set the stage for the infiltration. Phelan stared in disbelief as Ron unfurled a bundle of colorful fabrics, a patchwork of bright cloaks, mismatched masks, and eccentric hats. Disguises? She asked, eyeing the goat mask and sparkling cape he held out to her. This is insane. And stupid. Ron donned his own red cloak and elaborately designed eye mask, posing dramatically as the wind conveniently picked up and whipped the fabric behind him. Stupid? No. Bold? Absolutely. Phelan turned to Marcus, incredulous. And you're fine with this? Marcus adjusted the oversized feathered hat Ron had handed him, his calm demeanor unshaken. It's a solid plan, he replied simply. I've seen worse, and honestly, this might even be fun. Phelan groaned again, reluctantly putting on the sparkling cape and goat mask. "You're seriously enjoying this?" she muttered as Marcus gave her an approving nod. "When Ron's plans work, they work," Marcus said with quiet assurance. "I've learned to trust him." The bandit camp was a haphazard collection of tents, barricades, and supply barrels. The moon goat stood tied to a post in the center, its silver fur glinting faintly in the fading light. Ron led the way, his red cloak billowing dramatically as he strode into the camp. Phelan, sporting her goat mask and sparkling cape, stomped behind him while Marcus, feathered hat firmly in place, maintained a stoic silence. "Greetings, gentlemen," Ron declared, raising a gloved hand theatrically. "We are but humble adventurers." The bandits paused, clearly confused by the colorful spectacle. One of them gestured toward Phelan. "What's the goat mask for?" "It's a symbol of unity," Ron answered with unflinching enthusiasm. Phelan hissed under her breath, "Unity of stupidity, maybe." Despite the odd presentation, the bandits ushered the trio closer, none suspecting their true intent. As Ron scanned the layout, he whispered instructions to his companions. "Marcus, free the goat," he said. "Phelan, create small bursts of flame near the barrels, subtle but enough to draw their attention." Phelan grumbled, her hands sparking reluctantly. "Controlled chaos," she muttered, mimicking Ron's tone as she sent flames flickering toward the tents. The bandits shouted in alarm and scrambled to contain the fires, leaving their posts vulnerable. Marcus slipped through the shadows, cutting the moon goat loose and guiding it toward the forest. Meanwhile, Ron enacted the final stage of his plan. Using leftover tools and ropes, he rigged the barrels to collapse with a single pull. As the bandits returned to salvage their stockpile, the trap activated, ruining their weapons and supplies without harming anyone. The camp erupted in chaos as the bandits scrambled to contain the damage. "This isn't worth it," one of them shouted, throwing down a battered sword. "We're not cut out for this." Another bandit slumped against a ruined tent, sighing heavily. Maybe blacksmithing isn't such a bad idea. As the trio disappeared into the forest with the moon goat, the bandit camp lay in shambles, its members beginning to dismantle their operation and leave their criminal ways behind. The village erupted in cheers when the trio returned with the moon goat. The elder rushed forward, his eyes brimming with gratitude. "You've done more than save us," he said, his voice trembling. "You've given us hope." Ron accepted the elder's thanks humbly, handing the shimmering lunar compass to Marcus without a word. As the trio prepared to leave, Phelan leaned against the carriage, her sparkling cape still draped over her shoulders. "That was almost impressive," she admitted begrudgingly, eyeing Ron with a mixture of exaggeration and respect. Ron adjusted his spectacles, grinning. "The universe rewards precision, Phelan." Marcus gave a single approving nod, a gesture that carried more weight than words. Phelan hesitated, then smirked faintly. "Guess you're not totally useless, goat finder." Ron chuckled. "Stick around, Phelan. You'll see just how useful science can be." End of chapter 20 coming up next. Chapter 20 revealing true colors. Lumenberg pulsed with life, its streets alive with the clamor of trade and the rhythmic march of patrolling vanguards. Ron stepped through its gates like an actor onto a stage, his crimson cloak unequivocally marking him as a foreigner, his gleaming insignia identifying him as a divinant emissary of the warrior faction under the Rugal Familia. To observers, he seemed to be on a solo mission, his confident stride and commanding presence suggesting a man exploring the city out of curiosity or personal ambition. From the moment he entered, Ron seemed to dominate the city's rhythm. Guards exchanged knowing glances, merchants paused mid-bargain, and whispers rippled through the streets about the flame emissary, whose crimson cloak burned like a beacon. A dazzling distraction. Ron wasted no time making his presence felt. By his first morning, he was ensconced in the Grand Library, ostentatiously poring over tomes. His voice boomed across the quiet halls as he scribbled notes on ledgers detailing trade routes, booming commodities, and political hierarchies. "Remarkable records," he mused aloud, holding up a page as if its ink were pure gold. "Such intricate trade agreements. This city's economy could rival even Rugal Familia's stronghold." Scholars exchanged curious glances. Who was this flame emissary, both arrogant and deeply invested in their city's workings? Though his tone bordered on condescending, his observations were sharp, his questions incisive. In the afternoons, Ron wandered through trade halls and bustling markets, mingling with officials and elite merchants. His charm was disarming, his arrogance infuriating, yet his presence commanded undeniable attention. To a merchant's daughter, he offered a dazzling smile. Your poise reflects your father's leadership. Such grace. It's no wonder this city thrives with someone like you gracing its streets. Some admired him, others resented him, but no one ignored him. Threads in the weave. Though Ron appeared to act alone, subtle threads began to weave connections beneath his flamboyant displays. Notes, slipped into his cloak when no one was watching, hinted at a deeper story. The first arrived late one night, slid under his door at the inn where he'd rented a room. Ron's expression sharpened as he unfolded the parchment. Its words were precise. Trail established. Hideout routes mapped. Members identified. Proceed without interference. The note burned to ash in the brazier moments later, its contents erased but not forgotten. The unveiling. As days passed, the true purpose of Ron's presence became clearer, not through his overt actions, but through the calculated silence surrounding them. The flamboyant persona, the loud charisma, the bold arrogance, all were deliberate pieces of a larger puzzle, meticulously crafted weeks before Ron had even stepped through the city gates. On the outskirts of Luminary territory, nestled beneath the shadows of a lone, ancient tree, Ron had sat with Marcus and Phelan. The trio studied maps and strategies with sharp focus. Their plan was simple yet thorough. We go in separately, Ron had said, his tone unwavering. No direct contact once we're inside. If they suspect we're working together, the whole thing falls apart. Marcus nodded, his steady gaze fixed on the map. You'll draw their eyes. Phelan and I will work from the shadows, connect the routes, follow the trails, and map the hideout's connections. No bloodshed unless absolutely necessary. And I'll keep them watching me, Ron added with a smirk. Don't worry, I'm good at being distracting. Phelan's golden eyes narrowed as she pointed to a marked cluster on the map. The hideout is here. By the end of the first week, we'll have every route mapped and every face connected. You'll just need to keep them looking the other way. Ron's grin widened. Don't worry, little fox. You do your job, and I'll do mine. Shadows at work. While Ron basked in the spotlight, Marcus and Phelan worked quietly, unseen. They had entered the city separately, blending into its bustling streets with practiced ease. Phelan moved like a whisper, her elemental speed allowing her to tail targets without detection. Her keen eyes mapped the routes leading to the hideout, tracking the movements of Luminary members as they slipped in and out of hidden doors. Marcus followed close behind, ensuring their observations were precise and efficient. Each morning, their discoveries were relayed back to Ron through couriers who delivered coded parchments to designated drop points across the city. The messages painted a picture of steady progress. Ron's notes were boisterous yet strategic. Leaders charmed, donations made, research ongoing. Attention remains fixed on emissary. Phelan's replies were sharp and direct, routes fully mapped. Members linked to Luminary factions. Target confirmed. Trail expanding. Marcus's observations were steady and grounding. Asterisk bars patterns tracked, connections confirmed. Proceed cautiously. Avoid direct action. The system was flawless, their coordination unshakable. The celebration facade. By the end of the week, Ron's activities culminated in a grand feast at the city's most renowned restaurant. Under the guise of celebrating a close friend's birthday, he rented a private room, inviting street children to share in the abundance while musicians played in the corner. The laughter was infectious, the food abundant, and Ron's flamboyant presence dominated the room. Meanwhile, Marcus and Phelan seized the opportunity, connecting the final threads of the hideout's operations. Their routes and networks formed a complete map, a picture that pointed directly to the heart of the Luminary's influence. A unified front. What had begun as Ron's seemingly independent actions revealed itself as part of a carefully orchestrated plan, a gambit that combined misdirection, precision, and absolute trust. By the end of the week, the trio had succeeded in their initial mission. The Flame Emissary had captivated the city, and his allies had unraveled its secrets. Now, the next phase loomed, the stakes higher than ever. The Count and the Shadow War. Count Adric Drelmont was a man who understood the art of power, not the crude force of swords or gold, but the intricate web of alliances and influence that shaped kingdoms from their core. Though not a luminary himself, his ties to their holy order ran deep. His name carried weight in their sermons, his donations lined their coffers, and his network ensured their agendas were carried out without obstruction. At the heart of these ties lay his tenuous but strong partnership with Malric, the enigmatic leader of the Black Order. Their alliance was rooted in mutual benefit, Malric provided access to the elusive spirit bottle formula that created the monstrous Sorrow Fiends, while Adric offered political cover and resources to expand its reach. To the luminaries, Count Adric was a loyal supporter. To Malric, he was a partner in progress. But in truth, Adric was neither. The Count's ambitions extended far beyond collaboration. He craved exclusive control of the spirit bottle formula and the immense power it represented. The Sorrow Fiends were more than creations of bound souls. They were instruments of dominance, capable of reshaping the balance of power within the city and beyond. A fragile pact, it was a partnership built on necessity, not trust. Malric supplied the Holy Order with the spirit bottle formula to bolster their influence, while Adric ensured the luminaries had the political clout to operate without interference. Together, they had unleashed the Sorrow Fiends upon enemies of the luminaries, their monstrous presence serving as both a deterrent and a grim message. But Adric was growing impatient. For years, his alchemists had tried and failed to replicate the formula, and Malric stubbornly refused to share its full secrets. While the Count outwardly praised their partnership, privately, his disdain for the Black Order festered. "They keep us dependent," Adric had murmured to his aides one evening, his gaze fixed on the flickering flame of a nearby candle. Malric's secrets shackle the Holy Order to his whims. But no more. The time has come to sever those chains. His greed knew no bounds. To Adric, the spirit bottle was not just a tool, it was the key to controlling the luminaries themselves, and Malric's refusal to surrender its secrets was an unforgivable affront to his ambitions. The Flame Emissary's intrusion. When Ron entered the city, he arrived like a rising flame, an emissary of the warrior faction under regal familia, cloaked in crimson and bearing the insignia of a divinant. Initially, Adric paid him little mind. But as Ron's presence swelled, so too did the Count's interest. Reports began to circulate about Ron's mission, to investigate the origins of the Sorrow Fiends and the spirit bottle formula. Adric immediately understood the implications. If the warrior faction uncovered evidence of the Black Order's involvement, Malric's grip on the Holy Order would weaken. And if Ron could be manipulated into implicating Malric outright, it would give Adric the perfect excuse to destroy his rival and seize control of the formula himself. "This emissary may prove useful," Adric mused in his study, a sly smile playing at the corners of his lips. "If handled correctly, he could give me everything I need. If not, well, accidents happen." The trap is sprung. Adric's plan was twofold: to lure Ron into his intricate web of politics and intrigue, positioning himself as a helpful ally in the emissary's investigation. To implicate Malric and his followers in an attempted assassination on Ron's life, shifting blame onto the Holy Order itself. The rumors began to spread, meticulously crafted by Adric's loyal aides and whispered through the streets. Tales of the Black Order's intense interest in Ron were subtly sown, hinting at an alliance and an assassination plot orchestrated by disillusioned factions within the Holy Order. By the time the ball was announced, the seeds of suspicion had already taken root. A gilded invitation was delivered to Ron's chambers. "Lord Ron of the warrior faction, emissary of regal familia, you are cordially invited to the grand ball at Drelmont Manor, hosted in celebration of prosperity and peace. Your investigations into the welfare of our city are most admirable, and your presence will honor us greatly. Count Adric Drelmont." A game of masks. The ballroom of Drelmont Manor was a masterpiece of opulence, its chandeliers casting golden light on polished marble floors and velvet-draped walls. Nobles mingled in clusters, their conversations laced with veiled ambitions. At the center of it all stood Count Adric, a picture of refined authority and grace in his silver-trimmed attire. When Ron arrived, cloaked in crimson and exuding charisma, the room fell briefly silent. His reputation as the Flame Emissary had preceded him, and his burgeoning investigation into the Sorrow Fiends had not gone unnoticed. "Lord Ron," Adric greeted him warmly, extending a hand. "It is an honor to welcome an emissary of such distinction. Your efforts in uncovering the mysteries of the Sorrow Fiend are truly admirable." Ron's grip was firm, his smile matching the Count's in warmth yet concealing a hint of guardedness. "The honor is mine, Count Drelmont. Your city has been most accommodating to my investigation." As the evening unfolded, Adric subtly steered conversations towards the Black Order and their growing, destructive influence. He spoke of their dangerous ambitions and their rumored connections to the Sorrow Fiends, his words calculated to stoke fear and suspicion among his guests. "It is unfortunate," Adric declared during a toast, his voice carrying across the room, that certain factions within our city seek to undermine its prosperity. Their methods are dangerous. But I trust we are united in preserving peace and order. While the nobles murmured their agreement, Ron listened carefully, his own investigation already revealing the tangled threads of influence that connected Adric, Malric, and the luminaries. The Count's carefully chosen words and subtle glances did not go unnoticed. Unveiling the Count's web meanwhile, Marcus and Phelan's diligent work had unearthed far more than expected. Their investigations led them directly to Drelmont Manor itself, where they discovered records and correspondences explicitly linking Adric to Malric's operations. "It's worse than we thought," Phelan murmured, her golden eyes scanning a stolen ledger. "Adric isn't just tied to Malric. He's trying to take over the spirit bottle formula entirely. He wants exclusive control." Marcus nodded grimly. "Ron's mission is just a tool for him. If we're not careful, he'll use it to destroy Malric and turn the city into his personal kingdom." The noose tightens by the end of the evening. Adric believed his plan was flawless. The rumors about the Black Order, the whispers of infighting within the Holy Order, and the careful manipulation of Ron's investigation had set the perfect trap. But what the Count didn't realize was that the Flame Emissary and his allies were already working to unravel his meticulously spun web. As Ron left the manor, his crimson cloak trailing behind him, he exchanged a brief glance with Marcus, who lingered unnoticed near the entrance. In that silent exchange, a profound understanding passed between them. Adric's elaborate game was in full motion, but the Flame Emissary was ready to turn the tides. Whispers in the shadows. Before the ball, the room was dimly lit, a single flickering candle providing the only illumination beside a partially open parchment. Ron scanned the neatly folded message that had arrived just moments earlier via a courier, who had blended effortlessly with the morning crowd. The handwriting was unmistakable. Marcus, codename Dagger. Ron smirked to himself at the memory of insisting on comical codenames during their planning, a rare moment of levity in their dangerous work. "Plot against you by the Count confirmed," the note read. "Adric has discovered your ties to our investigation. He plans to use the Holy Order to eliminate you, perhaps even before the ball. Be vigilant. Find leverage. Dagger." Ron turned the parchment over and scribbled his reply in brisk, decisive strokes. "Let's set them up. Discover weaknesses on both sides. Foxy needs to dig deep. Hammer." He folded the message, sealing it with a practiced motion before handing it off to the courier waiting just outside his door. "Make sure it reaches him," Ron said with a half-smile, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. The Foxy's discovery elsewhere in the city, Phelan, codename Foxy, moved like a shadow through the crowded streets. Her golden eyes scanned the faces of passers-by as she pieced together information from subtle exchanges and stray conversations. Ron's directive was clear: uncover weaknesses within both the Holy Order and Count Adric. It was during these investigations that Phelan stumbled upon an unexpected lead. A chance encounter brought her face-to-face with Sindri Drelmont, the Count's son. The boy was seated alone in the gardens of the Drelmont estate, his pale face turned toward the sun as if seeking its warmth. He barely noticed Phelan slipping between the hedges, her presence masked by the gentle breeze. But what struck her most was his frailty, the way his hands trembled as he turned the pages of a book, the shallow rise and fall of his chest. It didn't take long for Phelan to learn the truth. Conversations between servants revealed that Sindri was dying of an unknown disease, one the Holy Order had promised to cure in exchange for the Count's unwavering support. Returning to the shadows, Phelan let out a slow breath. "So, this is why he agreed to work with them," she muttered to herself. Yet, it was clear from the servants' whispers that Count Adric's desperation to save his son was now overshadowed by his insatiable greed. A dark revelation: Marcus, ever the strategist, had been following the trail of shipments linked to the Sorrowfiend formula. His investigation led him to a chilling revelation: the Holy Order itself had orchestrated Sindri's affliction, planting the unknown disease to use as leverage against the Count. The pieces came together in Marcus's mind like a grim puzzle. The Holy Order's promise of a cure was nothing more than a cruel means to bind Adric to their agenda. And now, Adric's frustrations over their failure to deliver had driven him to seek alternatives, experimenting with the very formula they sought to control. Marcus relayed his findings to Ron in the same coded fashion: the disease was planted by the Order. Adric grows restless. He experiments with the formula. Dagger. Ron's reply came swiftly and succinctly: Let them destroy each other. Slip hints about stolen shipments. We tighten the noose. Hammer. End of chapter. Chapter 21 coming up next. Chapter 21. A shift in allegiance. Within the opulent confines of Drelmont Manor, Count Adric wrestled with a tormenting duality. His son's fading life was a constant, agonizing weight, yet his own ravenous ambition refused to be silenced. The Holy Order's empty promises had festered into a bitter resentment, pushing him toward a desperate gambit: the Luminaries. He'd once walked among them, and their vast resources dwarfed anything the Holy Order could ever offer. Alone in his study, Adric's gaze drifted over ledgers detailing shipments he'd discreetly diverted from the Holy Order. His clandestine experiments with the Sorrowfiend formula had yielded unexpected results. The creatures born from his alchemy were not the controlled horrors of the Black Order. These were erratic, monstrous, undeniably potent. Adric clenched his fists. If the Luminaries could perfect his twisted creations, they could provide not only a cure for Sindri but also the absolute leverage he craved to dominate the city. The time for pretense was over. It was time to betray the Holy Order and fully pledge himself to the Luminaries. Setting the trap, Marcus and Phelan moved with swift precision, weaving insidious messages into the city's intricate tapestry of gossip. Whispers of Adric's secret experiments began to circulate, reaching the Holy Order's ears as tales of a traitor who had stolen their resources for rogue alchemy. Simultaneously, subtle hints of the Holy Order's own manipulative schemes seeped into luminary circles, sowing seeds of doubt about their motives and methods. Bit by bit, the simmering tension between the two factions began to escalate into a dangerous boil. In the deepening shadows, Ron observed the unfolding chaos with a quiet, almost imperceptible, satisfaction. The Count and the Holy Order were on an inevitable collision course, each convinced of the other's treachery. All Ron and his allies needed to do was fan the flames and patiently await the explosion. "Two birds," Ron murmured, a sly, predatory grin touching his lips. "One stone." A dance of shadows. The ballroom was an absolute masterpiece of opulence, a stark declaration of Count Adric's immense wealth and influence. High, arched ceilings soared above, adorned with intricate murals depicting the city's storied history, every detail brought to life by the warm, inviting glow of crystal chandeliers. Soft, ethereal music drifted through the air, the gentle strains of violins and flutes weaving a refined and harmonious tapestry of sound. Dancers glided across the polished marble floor, their movements fluid and mesmerizing, as if part of a perfectly choreographed dream. Each step was in seamless sync with the melodies, their gowns and cloaks swirling like vibrant waves of color under the chandelier's radiant light. Waiters in crisp, immaculate uniforms moved through the crowd with ghost-like efficiency, carrying silver trays laden with sparkling wine and delicate hors d'oeuvres. The soft laughter of nobles and the gentle clinking of glasses created a symphony of revelry that blended seamlessly with the music. Ron stood at the very edge of this grand spectacle, his crimson cloak a striking, defiant contrast to the pastel hues worn by the other guests. He watched the dancers with a faint, knowing smile, his amusement evident as he sipped from a delicate crystal glass. There was a certain hypnotic beauty in the event's orchestrated grandeur, though his mind lingered on matters far darker than the scene before him. He turned slightly, his gaze catching Count Adric at the summit of a sweeping staircase. The Count's posture exuded an almost regal grace and supreme confidence as he surveyed the gathering, his silver-trimmed attire a subtle, yet undeniable, declaration of his elevated status. With a practiced, yet charming smile, Adric raised a hand and gestured toward Ron. "Lord Ron," Adric's voice carried effortlessly across the room, imbued with an unyielding authority. "Might I have a word with my most honored guest?" Ron didn't hesitate, his expression remaining perfectly calm and composed as he handed his glass to a passing waiter. He ascended the grand staircase with measured, deliberate steps, the soft hum of music and conversation gradually fading into a distant murmur as he drew closer to the Count. The vantage point from the top offered a breathtaking panorama of the ballroom below, the swirling figures of the dancers and the glittering decor coalescing into a scene straight out of a fantastical dream. Exchanging pleasantries, Count Adric, Ron said with a slight, respectful bow, his tone a carefully balanced blend of deference and lightheartedness. "The pleasure is entirely mine. I must say, you certainly know how to host an evening that will not soon be forgotten." Adric's smile was captivating, his eyes glinting with what could have been genuine warmth, or something far more intricately calculated. "Ah, Lord Ron, your words do me great honor. But truly, it is I who am fortunate to have you here. Your reputation precedes you, and your esteemed presence brings no small measure of prestige to this gathering." Ron inclined his head slightly, his smile unwavering, a subtle acknowledgement of the flattery. "Your city is most welcoming, Count, and this event? Remarkable. Truly, I am deeply impressed by the elegance and sophistication of your guests." Adric chuckled softly, a low, smooth sound, as he gestured toward the vibrant scene below. "This city has thrived under the steady hands of its people, Lord Ron, and I am exceedingly proud to count myself among them. Hosting this evening is but a small gesture of gratitude to those who contribute tirelessly to its prosperity." As the two men spoke, their conversation flowed with an almost effortless grace, each sentence carefully weighed and delivered with subtle intent. They exchanged pleasant anecdotes about the city's inherent beauty, discussed the paramount importance of unity among its people, and even touched upon the nuanced merits of diplomacy in turbulent times. To any casual observer, they appeared the epitome of cordiality, a respected noble and a distinguished visiting emissary engaged in nothing more than friendly, engaging discourse. "The offer, but our discussion truly demands refreshment," Adric declared after a deliberate pause, clapping his hands together lightly. A servant appeared as if summoned by magic, carrying a gleaming silver tray upon which sat a single glass filled with a deep, ruby-red liquid. "This," Adric announced, taking the glass and holding it up to the light, allowing it to catch the chandelier's glow, "is a creation from my own vineyards, aged to absolute perfection and meticulously blended with rare spices from distant, exotic lands. A drink truly worthy of an emissary such as yourself." Ron took the offered glass, his expression utterly unreadable as he studied the vibrant liquid within. The scent was rich and inviting, a complex blend of sweetness and warmth that hinted at careful craftsmanship and a hidden depth. "You're too kind, Count," he said smoothly, raising the glass slightly as if in a silent toast. "The honor is all mine, Lord Ron," Adric replied, his voice carrying a distinct note of satisfaction, a subtle tremor of triumph. "To our shared prosperity, and to the enduring strength of this magnificent city." Beneath the Count's impeccably composed exterior, his mind raced with a frantic energy. The poison was subtle, its effects meticulously delayed, just enough time for Ron to finish the glass and return to the bustling ballroom before succumbing. The moment his death was discovered, Adric's meticulously laid plan would unfold with devastating precision. The poison's unique, unmistakable signature would point directly and unequivocally to the Black Order, and Adric would then play the role of the grieving, shocked host, dramatically revealing his discovery of their involvement to the bewildered investigators. The Holy Order would predictably demand swift justice, and the warrior faction's wrath would descend like a storm upon Malric's unsuspecting followers. Adric would emerge as the city's undisputed savior, purging the Black Order while simultaneously eliminating one of his greatest, most formidable rivals. Ron, however, remained as calm and unperturbed as ever, his slender fingers brushing the delicate stem of the glass. His gaze flicked toward the ballroom below, where the dancers continued their elegant, oblivious waltz. A faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his lips, though his thoughts were clearly far from innocent revelry. "Delightful," Ron said after a beat, raising the glass once more. "To strength, then, Count." The curtain rises. Ron held the glass aloft, the ruby-red liquid glinting under the soft, golden glow of the grand chandeliers. He turned slowly toward Count Adric, his eyes steady, his lips curved into an enigmatic, almost teasing smile. "To strength, then, Count," he repeated, a subtle flick of amusement in his tone. And with a confident flourish, he tipped the glass back, allowing the liquid to cascade smoothly down his throat. The Count's heart gave a quick, triumphant lurch, though he betrayed absolutely nothing of his inner turmoil. Every feature of his expression remained impeccably composed, a flawless mask of aristocratic decorum, yet deep within, a spark of sheer triumph ignited into a blazing inferno. "It is done." Adric's eyes flicked almost imperceptibly to the ornate clock on the far wall. He began a silent count in his head. 5. The poison would take hold soon. 4. His timing had been flawless, suspicion would fall exactly where he intended. 3. The emissary's life was but mere seconds away from its inevitable end. Ron slowly lowered the glass, his smile widening, and he leaned languidly against the edge of the balustrade, the entire ballroom sprawling beneath them, a vibrant, living tapestry. "Exquisite," he declared, his tone almost a playful taunt. "Without a doubt, the best drink I've ever had." The Count stiffened, a barely perceptible tension in his shoulders, though his calculated mask of composure remained miraculously intact. He opened his mouth, prepared to offer a polite excuse to gracefully exit, an elegant departure meticulously planned to avoid any suspicion, but Ron reached out, his fingers brushing lightly against Adric's wrist, halting him mid-turn. "Leaving so soon, Count? Surely not without another word?" Ron's grip was firm but measured, his voice carrying a curious, almost challenging edge. Adric froze, the hairline fracture in his carefully constructed composure going entirely unnoticed to all but the discerning young emissary before him. Ron's next words came softly, almost a whisper, yet sharp enough to carve deeply into the Count's meticulously constructed resolve. "I'm glad it wasn't poison, right, Count?" A story in shadows. Adric's mouth opened, but no coherent words managed to escape. His thoughts raced, crashing into each other like frantic, tumultuous waves in a storm-tossed sea. Before he could even begin to find his voice, Ron released his wrist and turned back toward the railing, his tone becoming distant, almost poetic. "You know, Count," Ron began, tilting his head slightly as if utterly absorbed in watching the dancers below, "there's a peculiar tale I once heard. Of a devoted father, desperate, heartbroken, who would sacrifice anything for his only son. A boy cursed by a malevolent witch, his youth tragically stolen by a malady no healer could ever hope to cure. The father searched far and wide, begged for aid from every corner of the land. He didn't know that the very witch who cast the curse watched his every move from the deep shadows." Adric's composure finally cracked, his breathing quickening ever so slightly, a telltale tremor in his facade. "An interesting tale, Lord Ron, but what?" Ron's hand gestured lightly, a subtle, dismissive wave that silenced him instantly as his tone darkened, growing more ominous. "The father, in his boundless despair, struck a desperate deal with her, the very witch who had cursed his boy. Promises were made, miraculous cures offered, but it would all take time. And so the father obediently followed her every word, every twisted command, all the while consumed by a gnawing doubt. Was it the witch who was the true devil, or was it the father himself?" Ron finally turned fully to face the Count, his gaze cutting like a razor-sharp blade, piercing through Adric's carefully constructed defenses. "What do you think, Count? Was it the witch, or the father?" Adric's breath caught in his throat, a sharp, involuntary gasp. He instinctively stepped back, his polished shoes clinking faintly against the pristine marble. A new, terrifying thought gripped him, an unwelcome, undeniable realization. "He knows." Ron didn't follow as the Count hastily descended the grand stairs, his movements stiff, almost wooden, his mind clouded with a rising tide of unease and dread. Instead, the emissary merely watched him flee, a quiet, almost imperceptible smirk curling on his lips. He murmured, more to himself than to anyone else, "The curtain's about to rise. The show begins." The Count's anxiety. Adric had orchestrated the evening with meticulous precision, down to the last detail. The Black Order was meant to appear by now, disrupting the festivities just as the insidious effects of the poison claimed Ron's life. His loyal guards had been strategically placed, poised to defend the innocent guests and drive the Black Order into a chaotic retreat, leaving behind a trail of irrefutable evidence that would irrevocably tie them to the assassination plot. But absolutely nothing unfolded as planned. The emissary was still alive, completely unscathed, his voice calm and unfaltering. The Black Order was nowhere to be seen. And the Count's meticulously laid scheme, his grand deception, now hung precariously in the balance, teetering on the edge of utter collapse. Unbeknownst to Adric, Marcus and Phelan had expertly woven their own counterplot into the very fabric of his carefully orchestrated evening. Phelan, disguised as a discreet waitress, had ensured no Holy Order agents made it past the ballroom's threshold. Marcus, disguised as a seemingly ordinary guard, had shadowed the Count's every movement, orchestrating subtle, yet crucial, disruptions to his grand plans. Every turn Adric made seemed to be haunted, phantom footsteps trailing him, whispers he couldn't quite place, shadows that lingered for just a fraction too long. It wasn't the Black Order that hunted him. It was the cunning, unseen hands of Ron's allies, subtly pressing him deeper and deeper into the suffocating grip of his own paranoia. The hidden vials fleeing the prying eyes of the now unsettling ballroom, Adric hurried to the darkened, moonlit garden behind his sprawling mansion, where slivers of moonlight filtered through the dense canopy of ancient trees. Beneath the protective cover of shadow and silver light, he knelt frantically before a concealed chest, cunningly hidden beneath the stone paving. He unlatched it with trembling, desperate hands, pulling free a series of 5 vials. The viscous liquid within each vial glowed faintly, a dark and undeniably foreboding hue. His breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, his voice barely above a desperate whisper. "I must send them to the luminaries, or use them if it comes to it. My son," his voice cracked with raw emotion, panic rising in a suffocating wave. "Sindri, I'll fix this." But a voice, calm, sharp, and utterly cutting, pierced the tense silence. "You seem frantic." Adric's blood ran cold. He turned slowly, the moonlight sliding across his face, revealing a shadowed figure stepping deliberately into view. "I missed you at the party," the voice said smoothly, its owner's face emerging fully from the deepening gloom. "Thought you were avoiding me, so I followed. Were you perhaps planning to kill me?" It was Ron. The Count's shoulders slumped, a bitter, hollow laugh escaping him, devoid of any humor. "So it was you? You knew? Did you orchestrate all of this?" Ron tilted his head slightly, his expression cool and utterly unbothered, almost amused. "You flatter me, Count. It wasn't all me. My friends helped. I merely orchestrated the dance." Adric, torn between overwhelming despair and a reluctant, grudging admiration for Ron's cunning, felt the crushing weight of defeat settle heavily over him. But then his eyes fell upon the vials clutched tightly in his trembling hands, and a desperate, primal spark of hope reignited within him. Without a single word, he uncorked one of the vials with a desperate flick of his thumb and swallowed the thick, viscous liquid in a single, desperate gulp. "No!" Ron lunged forward, reaching out a hand, his voice laced with alarm. "What are you doing? Are you mad?" Adric collapsed to the ground, his body writhing in violent convulsions. Then, slowly, terrifyingly, he began to rise, his form twisting and grotesquely growing, dark tendrils of raw energy coiling and wrapping around him. His once human body shifted, flesh and shadow merging into something monstrous, something grotesque, yet undeniably, terrifyingly powerful. His eyes burned with an unholy, malevolent light as his laughter echoed through the garden, no longer human, but a guttural, demonic rumble. "How do you like my new power, Ron?" Adric's voice rumbled, deep and horribly distorted, alien. Desperate, yes, but undeniably effective. He grinned, his monstrous, towering form casting a chilling shadow over Ron. "I wasn't planning on using this, but you've left me no choice. Tonight, you and your meddling friends die." The garden erupted into violent chaos. Marcus, without hesitation, took a decisive step forward, planting himself firmly between Ron and the grotesque monstrosity that Adric had become. The corrupted form of the Count towered over them, his clawed hands flexing, as dark tendrils of unholy energy writhed ominously in the air around him. "Stay behind me," Marcus growled, his shield raised protectively, the dagger clutched in his hand gleaming faintly in the moonlight. His stance was purely defensive but agile, every movement calculated to protect and deflect the impending assault. Phelan's voice rang through the fray, sharp and urgent, a beacon of clarity amidst the rising storm. "Hold steady." Her golden eyes glowed faintly as she summoned intricate threads of wind magic, weaving them into an invisible, swirling current that flowed gracefully around her allies. The magic enveloped Marcus, boosting his reflexes to lightning speed and sharpening his already formidable quickness as he expertly evaded Adric's erratic, devastating strikes. Adric lunged forward, his monstrous claws sweeping through the air in a devastating arc of raw, unbridled power. Marcus twisted just in time, sidestepping the attack with surprising ease and driving his shield with crushing force into the Count's side to break his momentum. The wind magic that coursed through him made his movements almost effortless. He was swift, elusive, and utterly unyielding. Ron's powerhouse assault surged forward with explosive speed, his crimson cloak billowing dramatically behind him as he raised his sword high above his head. The blade gleamed fiercely with divine light, its holy edge biting deep into Adric's corrupted, dark flesh with every relentless strike. The Count howled in agonizing fury, his monstrous form writhing grotesquely as the pure, overwhelming power of Ron's attacks forced him back, step by painful step. "You're strong," Adric hissed, his voice distorted and guttural, a sound of primal rage. "But strength alone won't save you." Ron ignored the taunt, his movements relentless, a blur of focused intent. Each swing of his sword was powered by the calculated energy of a seasoned warrior, a master of combat. He wasn't enjoying the brutal battle, but his mind worked furiously, dissecting Adric's new, terrifying form, desperately analyzing its weakness. This was not the Sorrow Fiend. The divine power that had easily torn through those constructs wasn't having the same overwhelming effect here. Divine power isn't enough. Ron muttered under his breath, his thoughts racing, a cold, analytical fire in his eyes. This is different. It's corrupted, yes, but it's something more. Phelan's defensive mastery, Adric roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage, his monstrous claws reaching for Marcus with unbridled fury, but Phelan was already moving, a blur of golden light and nimble grace. With a precise flick of her wrist, a shimmering barrier of protective wind erupted instantly between them, deflecting the brutal attack and sending Adric staggering backward, momentarily disoriented. "Focus on Marcus," Phelan called, her voice sharp and clear, addressing the swirling currents of wind magic that obeyed her every command. Her small, polished shield gleamed as she darted into the fray, reinforcing her embattled teammate while meticulously maintaining her distance from the main, devastating clash. Marcus grunted with exertion as he blocked another devastating strike, his dagger flashing out in calculated, precise riposts. He knew his crucial role: pure endurance and unwavering defense, keeping the monstrous beast occupied and distracted while Ron landed the truly devastating blows. Phelan's wind magic wrapped around him like an ethereal, unbreakable armor, granting him the unparalleled precision and blinding speed to hold his ground despite the relentless, overwhelming onslaught. The turning point the brutal battle wore on, each agonizing minute stretching into an eternity. Their bodies were strained to their absolute limits, their breaths ragged gasps, each inhale a struggle. Ron's mind focused entirely on the fight, a singular, burning intensity, meticulously calculating every move, every subtle shift in the monster's chaotic energy. Adric was utterly relentless, a force of pure, destructive chaos, the dark tendrils of his corrupted power growing increasingly erratic and unpredictably violent as the agonizing battle stretched into its final, desperate moments. Marcus blocked a particularly savage swipe that sent him skidding violently across the hard ground. He raised his shield again, panting, his muscles screaming in protest, as he glanced urgently toward Ron. "Any minute now, Ron. We're at our limit." Ron nodded, a grim, determined set to his jaw, his hand tightening around the hilt of his sword, his knuckles white. His allies had given absolutely everything, holding the line with incredible bravery, long enough for him to finally finish this. It was time. "You two, get away." Marcus and Phelan exchanged a quick, knowing glance, understanding instantly the gravity of Ron's command. Without a single word of hesitation, they broke from the fray with astonishing swiftness, their movements fluid and practiced as they put critical distance between themselves and the now terrifying battlefield. End of chapter 22 coming up next. Chapter 22 Dark Punisher. A divine avatar Ron anchored his feet, his sword raised as he began to channel his power. The blade vibrated, its glow intensifying with each ripple of energy that surged outward from his body. "Charging now," he murmured, his voice steady despite the immense force coiling around him. The ground beneath his boots fractured, cracked spider webbing as the energy spiraled upward, manifesting into a towering avatar, a colossal sword forged from pure aura. The sheer presence of it illuminated the garden, casting wild, dancing shadows across the trees and walls. Adric's monstrous grin faltered. He watched Ron's aura expand, an unsettling unease creeping into his voice. "You and your puny powers won't match my new creation," he spat. Ron's focus didn't waver. The sword avatar pulsed, its raw force pushing the air into heavy, oppressive waves. In response, Adric unleashed his own dark power, tendrils of shadow coiling and whipping like a storm. "Ha ha ha ha," he roared, summoning every ounce of his strength as corrupted magic lashed forward. "Come at me, Ron. You'll die with this futile attempt." But his laughter morphed into a shriek of fear as Ron's avatar grew brighter, sharper, deadlier with every passing moment. Ron's voice, now a thunderous roar, cut through the tension. Dark Punisher. Ultimate Strike. With a single, decisive motion, Ron unleashed the sword avatar. The devastating energy tore through the darkness in a blinding cascade. Adric roared in defiance, his corrupted form raising every ounce of resistance to meet the strike head-on. The garden exploded in a catastrophic clash, the ground shattering and the air trembling as dark and divine forces collided. Adric stood firm, his monstrous bulk straining against the overwhelming assault, but his strength was no match for Ron's unwavering resolve. The divine energy engulfed him completely, piercing through layers of corrupted flesh and tearing apart the darkness that fueled him. The aftermath, the garden fell silent, broken only by Ron's ragged breaths as he lowered his sword, his aura flickering faintly. Marcus and Phelan returned to his side, their faces etched with exhaustion, yet triumphant. Ron stared down at the fallen Count, whose monstrous form had been stripped away, leaving only his broken, human shell. "So you turned to dark power," Ron said softly, his voice steady despite his fatigue. "You weren't the witch, but you became the devil instead." Adric's lips trembled, his voice barely audible. "My son, please help my son. He is my..." Before he could finish, a shadowy figure emerged, a blade flashing in the moonlight. With swift, chilling precision, the figure severed Adric's head, the grotesque sight leaving Marcus and Phelan stunned. The head rolled to the ground, facing Ron, whose breath caught as the shadowy figure revealed itself. "Well done, young Phoenix," the figure purred, his voice smooth and filled with dark amusement. "You are certainly strong. Too bad I won't be able to stay and play with you tonight." Ron's eyes narrowed, his exhaustion forgotten as he recognized the man. Malric, the Black Order's leader, smiled, scooping up the 4 remaining vials from the chest with practiced ease. Ron lunged forward, hand outstretched. "No, leave those." But Malric was already retreating, his form dissolving into the shadows as his final words lingered in the air. "We'll meet again, young Phoenix." Fractures and Fates, Marcus collapsed onto the soft, damp grass, lying flat on his back and staring up at the star-flecked sky. His chest heaved as he let out a deep sigh, his exhaustion evident. "Phew," he muttered, rubbing a hand over his face, "it's finally over." That drained most of the life out of me. Beside him, Phelan wobbled, her legs trembling, though a proud smirk played on her lips. The weariness in her eyes betrayed her. She placed her hands on her hips and stared down at Marcus. "You didn't do much," she teased, playful but edged with pride. "I did a lot of the fighting, not to mention all the shielding I had to maintain, to save Ron from taking hits, and especially you." She puffed up her chest, feigning self-importance as if she had carried the entire battle. Marcus turned his head, looking up at her with a faint, exhausted smile. "Thanks, Phelan," he muttered, his words sincere but lacking the fiery retort she'd hoped for. Phelan blinked, momentarily caught off guard by his subdued reply. His quiet gratitude surprised and oddly satisfied her. "Good," she said, crossing her arms and standing as tall as her shaky legs allowed. "At least you know who did the heavy lifting." Her words carried a hint of smugness, but beneath it was an unspoken camaraderie. Marcus chuckled softly, too tired to argue. He closed his eyes, letting the weight of the battle slip away for just a moment. A monster at rest, Ron stood a short distance away, his breathing steady, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if scanning for the faintest sign of Malric. His crimson cloak fluttered in the night breeze, his posture unyielding, a stark contrast to his weary companions. "You monster," Phelan called out, her stern gaze laced with playful irritation. "We're tired here, and you're still standing like you're ready to fight an entire city." "It's inhuman." Ron glanced back, his face calm, unreadable, but the faintest twitch at the corner of his lips suggested amusement. "I have to stay ready," he replied, his tone level but thoughtful. "We have a major discovery here. Yes, we missed our chance with Malric, but we've gained more than I expected." Marcus groaned softly, raising a hand in surrender. "Ron, you have a lot of reporting to do." "No," Ron countered, walking toward his friends with deliberate calm. "That's your job." Marcus waved a hand weakly, his voice dripping with mock exasperation. Yes, I know, but, for the love of the gods, let me rest for just a little while first. Ron approached them, crouching to offer his hands to both Marcus and Phelan. Take all the time you need, he said softly. We've earned it. With his help, Marcus hauled himself upright, his knees buckling slightly as he leaned on Ron's shoulder. Phelan took Ron's other hand, her playful pride melting into a moment of mutual gratitude as she steadied herself. Together, the three stood under the moonlight, the echoes of their battle fading into the stillness of the night. Elsewhere, Malric's glee far from the scene of the battle, in a hidden chamber lit by the eerie glow of alchemical flames, Malric held the 4 vials, his expression twisted into a grin of dark satisfaction. That traitorous bastard, Adric, he muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. Such a waste. He thought he could outmaneuver me, but look at him now. Another fool undone by his own greed. He placed the vials gently onto a table, their dark liquid shimmering ominously in the flickering light. His eyes lingered on them, his grin widening. But I must admit, he continued, almost to himself, he left behind a wondrous gift. A breakthrough, really. Malric turned toward the table, running a finger along one of the vials with almost reverent care. Adric might have been a wasted talent, but his desperation birthed something extraordinary. He discovered a new formula. Improved it, even. I suppose I have him to thank for this. He laughed softly, the sound echoing off the stone walls as he gazed at the vials. This is just the beginning. The phoenix may rise, but every flame eventually burns out. And when it does, he trailed off, his eyes glinting with malice. In the distance, faint footsteps approached, but Malric didn't turn. He remained focused on the vials, his fingers tracing the edges of their glass surfaces. Let the games begin, he murmured. Beneath the surface, Ron wasted no time. The echoes of battle still lingered in his mind as he moved through the grand halls of Count Adric's mansion, flanked by city soldiers and local investigators. Their boots clicked against the pristine marble, the somber weight of their task unspoken but heavy in the air. Every corner of the mansion was meticulously searched. Cabinets were emptied, bookshelves examined, and hidden compartments revealed. As Ron strode through the opulent corridors, his eyes caught sight of a young boy in a wheelchair. Sindri Drelmont, the fragile son of the fallen count, was being escorted by 2 lady servants and a pair of stoic mansion guards. The boy's pale face and trembling hands told a story of suffering far beyond his years. Ron paused, his gaze softening. Poor boy, he murmured to himself, his voice low enough that no one could hear. He was a pawn in his own father's schemes. Done in by the man who should have protected him. Ron's thoughts lingered for a moment, but his resolve remained unshaken. His pity for Sindri quickly gave way to the mission at hand. The boy was no longer his concern. The investigation took precedence. The hidden laboratory hours into the search, a discovery sent a ripple of unease through the team. Beneath the sprawling mansion, concealed behind layers of stone and secrecy, lay a hidden laboratory. The entrance had been expertly hidden, but the investigators' determination and Ron's relentless drive eventually brought it to light. The air was stale and thick as they descended the spiral staircase. Flickering torches illuminated the space, revealing rows of overturned tables, shattered glass vials, and scattered papers. It was clear the lab had been ransacked in a hurry. Ron's eyes scanned the room, his mind piecing together the scene. This wasn't abandoned, he said, his voice steady but grim. It was confiscated, forcefully and hastily. The investigators nodded, examining the remnants of research notes and fragmented alchemical apparatus. Ron picked up a torn scrap of parchment, his brow furrowing as he read the faint, hastily scrawled notes, formulas, calculations, and cryptic symbols, none of which he could fully decipher. Malric, Ron murmured, the name slipping from his lips like a curse. He must have ordered the Dark Order to seize everything here. Whatever Adric drank, the formula that turned him into a monster, it was important enough for them to risk exposure. They've taken it all. The weight of the realization pressed down on him. If Malric had the formula, the consequences could be catastrophic. A growing catastrophe. Ron stepped back from the wreckage, his gaze distant as he processed the implications. Whatever this formula is, he began, his voice quiet but resolute, it's already in the wrong hands. And if Malric has it, this could rival the Malice Bloom in scale. Perhaps even surpass it. The investigators exchanged nervous glances, the gravity of Ron's words sinking in. The Malice Bloom, a catastrophe so devastating its name was etched into history, was a constant reminder of the dangers posed by unrestrained ambition and corruption. Now, Ron faced the possibility of another calamity, one born of Adric's desperation and Malric's greed. "This goes far deeper than we thought," Ron continued, gripping the hilt of his sword instinctively. "We're not just dealing with monsters anymore. This is something else entirely, a weapon, a disease, a curse. All rolled into one." He turned to the soldiers and investigators, his voice firm. "Gather every scrap of evidence. Every note, every fragment. We can't leave anything behind." Marcus and Phelan's reports pointed to Malric orchestrating all of this. If those reports are accurate, then we may have a trail to follow. A dreadful foreboding as the team worked to recover what little remained of the laboratory's secrets. Ron's thoughts turned to the broader implications of their discovery. The transformation that had consumed Adric was unlike anything he had ever faced. Its dark, writhing energy, its resistance to divine power, this wasn't just another iteration of the Sorrow Fiend. Ron clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he forced himself to focus. There was no time for doubt or hesitation. The path forward was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the danger they faced was growing, and the stakes had never been higher. In the back of his mind, the image of Malric lingered, his smug grin, his mocking tone as he disappeared into the shadows with the stolen vials. Ron's resolve hardened. "This isn't over, Malric," he muttered to himself. "Not by a long shot." Masks and marches. The sound of marching boots echoed through the mansion, heavy and deliberate, as the Luminaries' vanguard arrived in full force. Their golden armor gleamed under the flickering torchlight, the rhythmic clatter of their weapons and shields sending waves of unease through the investigators still combing the scene. At the forefront strode a high-ranking paladin, his commanding presence demanding attention. His silver cloak bore the insignia of the Holy Order, his expression stern as he approached Ron without hesitation. "This lab, this mansion, is under our jurisdiction," the paladin declared, his voice firm and authoritative. "Relinquish all evidence and materials to us immediately. Do not question the authority of the Holy Order in our land." The tension hung heavy in the air as the paladin's gaze bore into Ron, expecting resistance, braced for an argument. But Ron's expression shifted, not to outrage, but to something far more relaxed, even amused. Sure, Ron replied, his tone light and dismissive, a faint grin tugging at his lips. He spread his arms casually, as if shrugging off the situation entirely. "Not that I have anything else to discover here anyway." The paladin frowned slightly, unsure whether Ron's words were sincere or dripping with sarcasm. Ron leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound conspiratorial. "Look, I was in this city for fun. Honestly, I didn't even think about digging deeper into any of this." He reached into his coat and produced a small pouch of gold, tossing it lightly toward the paladin, who caught it instinctively. Ron smirked, his tone shifting to playful arrogance. "Save me some face here, yeah? Make me look cool. I'm not interested in investigation or jurisdiction or whatever, you're the boss. It's just, well, my father told me to come here, and I don't want him to think I'm slacking off." The paladin blinked, momentarily caught off guard by Ron's demeanor. He examined the gold pouch briefly before slipping it into his belt, his expression softening into a pleased smile. "Of course, Lord Ron," the paladin said, his tone surprisingly accommodating. "No need for trouble. You've done enough simply by being present. Rest assured, we'll handle matters from here." Ron winked, his grin widening as he spun on his heel and made his way back toward the mansion's main hall. "You're too kind, sir. Really, too kind." Playing the part as Ron exited the lab, his smirk faded slightly, replaced by a sharper, calculating expression. His mind ticked over the trove of evidence he had already secured, the fragmented notes tucked carefully into his satchel. He had no need to argue with the Luminaries, their jurisdiction mattered little now that he had what he came for. But playing the fool was a skill he had perfected. To the paladin, Ron was nothing more than a spoiled son of some noble family, a bumbling emissary too arrogant and foolish to pose any real threat. Yet beneath the facade, Ron was anything but careless. End of chapter.